Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And that's, of course, 1 p.m. on the East Coast for those of you on the other side of the country. And we talk about all things related to building a business, building a professional practice, and building wealth. So today, I'm really happy to have as my guest Jason Jurado. Jason and I are part of a group. We meet once a month. We're all ex-military people, and we trade business leads and talk about the challenges of transitioning from military to civilian life. Some people are recent transitionees, as we might say. Some, were in the military quite some time ago. So it's actually a really great group. And I don't want to take too long to do an introduction because I want to get right to Jason. But Jason has spent his civilian career taking, I think, what he learned in the military and helping other people by applying those lessons to their path to success. So Jason, thank you very much for joining me on People Making Money. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you for the invite and for being such a great host and having me on here. It's really exciting to join a new community. I'm all about, and we'll get into that, of course, I'm all into all community. And so to be able to join and meet your community, so to speak, it's really exciting.
Great. So, as I typically do with guests on this show, because I like to have them trace their professional arc so people can see how their professional life develops. So take us back as far as you're willing to go, even into childhood, if that works.
Right.
What did you want to be when you were a kid? I mean, I know for myself, I did not grow up thinking, hey, I want to be an independent trustee. In fact, I don't think I had any idea what that was. Right? I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be an engineer on a train. That. So, if you're willing to share, what growing up as a kid, what is it that you thought you wanted to do?
Thank you. And thank you for the question. And this is one that sometimes on other shows, I do other podcasts and other interviews and stuff, and I'm challenged because my story does begin in the beginning. My story does begin as a child, as a youngster, and sometimes I feel I'm a little apprehensive about going that far back for me to be succinct and for time's sake. But so thank you for that, the opportunity to share. And so I'm a healer. I've always been a healer. I've always been empathetic. I've always had seen things, felt things from a very young age, and it's in my bloodline, but it wasn't talked about. And so as a youngster, I always had somewhat of a calling to help people. And whether that was, sitting with a friend, I was the friend that everyone came to for help as we got older and you started to socialize. And I knew when to listen. I knew when to put in my 2 cents and then when to spread that between the two. But I think with a lot of us, I think the challenge is, and this is kind of what my journey has been, is that it's hard to find a mentor. It's hard to find someone that's going to say, yeah, you're going to do that, or let's recognize your talents, your abilities, and let you grow with that. Because, like you said, sometimes as kids, we have a great imagination, which we should never stop having a great imagination. And we want to be astronauts and we want to do these amazing things. And, and those around us, the adults, so to speak, in the room should be helping us with that. Now, for me, that was just my calling. It's who I was. And we'll get into it later about how that became a career, because that was always a challenge for me as well. That question about, well, this is just my calling, it's what I do, and I help people. But beyond that, just to kind of talk a little bit, I always loved knowledge. I've always have a thirst for knowledge and always been excited. And I was the kid that would go to the library during recess. I mean, I like to play, and I played all the sports, and I'm very physical. But I remember maybe third grade going to the library and looking at art books and other books. And oddly enough, I found law. And for some reason, at a very young age, law spoke to me to the point where, and this is even, I even look back and go, you're a weird kid, Jason, that I used to take out law books and read case studies for what that's worth and for what I actually understood of it. But I was excited about that for a couple of years, and I really, influencing people, communication. There's a lot of aspects to trial law that just spoke to me, and being a speaker and a trainer, that's just been inherent in who I am my whole life. And so that was the only career that I really remember wanting as a youngster was looking at the law for a while and reading law books and being excited about that. And other than that, I just kind of was like, let's see what shows up.
About how old were you when you were reading law books and such?
Around between 8 and 10.
Okay,
Remember
so
those
really
years.
young.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to go back to something you said right at the beginning, which is you said um, being a person who helps is in your bloodline. Kind of, would you mind expanding on that? And what do you mean by that?
So that's one that I really want to honor, and I really don't want to disrespect people that are out there that. So my family is Chiricahua Apache. My great grandmother was actually born on the reservation in New Mexico. Well, she was born in the New Mexico area, born in that area, and this is 1871. My family had children really late. So my great grandmother had kids when she was in her 30s, and then my grandpa had kids in his 30s, and then my dad had me when he was, I think, 34. So so my line is not that far back, I mean, it is actually that far back. It goes there. So my great grandmother was a medicine woman, but she was into herbs. And I was saying where, we don't get mentored, that the most that I would get as a kid is I remember at times my dad would say, he reminds me of grandma.
Mm,
Oh, that's like grandma. And then as I got older, I would hear some of the stories, and this is a whole nother show to talking about, about race and about how that shows up. But so that's where my lineage goes to. Is my great grandmother was a medicine woman. She was into herbs, which is not my calling. Plant spirit is not my calling, but
uh-huh.
but it was there. And my family's very intuitive. My family on my dad's side were Native American, Spanish, and Mexican,
Okay.
and very attached to those roots. And so I say that I am of that culture, but I'm not from that culture. I didn't grow up in it because my grandmother passed away in 1960, and I was born in 71. So she wasn't around. I wasn't around her, but through my father. And my dad has the same thing. My dad he has the same stuff, but once again, how we, and not to talk about his journey, but same thing. He grew up on a ranch. He was born in 1938. Grew up on a ranch. You just do what you do. You do your chores. You do your work.
Right.
Let's not talk about that stuff. It just shows up. And so I'm blessed now that later on in life, 4 years ago, I moved closer to my dad, and I get to spend a lot of time with him now. And we get to talk stories, and we get to tell, he tells me about, oh, I have, the seven spirits that stay with him and that he has dreams about and that they talk to him. And so these are things that are being exposed to me later on in life. But early in life, I was aware to an extent of it, but not enough to really be like, oh, this is, as a kid, what do you know about a calling?
Right. Right. Oh, so you're going through school. By the way, I can relate to being in the library in recess. 'Cause when I was in sixth grade, the school I went to had this great library, and especially when it rained, it was the best place to be.
Yeah.
In the whole school, like just pouring through books. So really, really resonates. So as you're going through school, you get through high school. Okay, and now it's kind of time. What are you going to do? So what once you graduated high school, what was the decision tree at that point?
So that's an interesting piece to my puzzle, because as we were talking about going on the show, and just as I reflect on my past, I think about these things. And so two things I wanted to mention real quick is my two biggest influences growing up are really different, but in the way the same. And I'll just touch on that really lightly. So my grandfather on my mom's side owned his own garage from 1947 to 1986. He was a business owner. He owned his garage. He sold Oldsmobiles. He sold boats. He had his own airplanes. He sold planes.
Wow.
Very, very focused on work. But
Mhm.
he was born in, I think, 1913 actually, on that side. And, that's a different generation. And so you worked hard, you grounded out, and Gramps would come home and have his Jack Daniels cocktail and just relax and sit on the chair. And so I saw that. So that was my vision of owning your own business. You work really hard, you sacrifice a lot, and you do that. But he was happy. He loved working on cars. He loved, we call it busting knuckles. He loved working on cars and doing that. And so I picked that up as well. My brother actually became a mechanic before he became a firefighter. Me, it wasn't that much. This comes into play at the middle of that story. I'll pause that for a second. And my other one was my dad. And share a little bit about my dad. But my dad grew up on the ranch, went in the Marine Corps, got out, and he worked as a cattleman. Did out here in Central California, and just kind of just worked. Dad worked at Laura Scudder's. He worked at different factories, but then he found his way to get back. There's in the mid 1980s in the town that we lived in, somebody built a thoroughbred horse ranch, and so he went on and he helped on the maintenance side because he was a horseman, but also he builds and did construction. So he helped build that ranch, and through that, he then started working with the horses, and then started being a trainer and worked his way through there. So he found his way home. He found his way back to his passion through doing other things. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned that because my two visions of what success are really different, but also that kind of, so for me, growing up, I lived in a small town, but I wasn't like, well, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go do this. And it just wasn't on the front of mind. It just was, I'm going to live my life. Mm-hmm. The question that I think you and I have received multiple times, I guarantee it, is why did you join the military? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like I said, my dad was in the Marine Corps, my uncle's in the Marine Corps, my uncle's in the Army. We've got military family, but my father he said to us, I have an older brother. He said, if you go in the military, join the Air Force. Don't join the Marine Corps. It's better. It's better duty. It's good chow. You get an education, and it wasn't rebellious. Like, well, screw you. I'm going to go in the Marine Corps. I just knew from a young age I was going to join the Marine Corps. It was just one of those feelings I had. So from around 12, I just knew I was going to join the Marine Corps. So, and that was enough for me. That was enough of a light. That was enough of a path. That was enough of a vision for me to just jump on. I didn't have a clear vision of what it was going to be after. I think a lot of us don't. Right. College wasn't in the cards for me. I was intelligent, but I didn't enjoy school at that structure. So I didn't have great grades, and economically it wasn't in the cards for me to go to college. So as I got closer, I graduated when I was 17. I'm a youngster. And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to use my GI Bill, and I'm going to go to college, and I'll become an officer, and then I'll do that in the Marine Corps. That was kind of 16 to 17 as I was getting closer to actually going in. I started to kind of formulate that plan. Well, so jumping back again to being a mechanic and turning wrenches, I knew I didn't want to work on cars. I knew that just wasn't for me. It wasn't. So they said, well, I scored really high on the entry exam, the ASVAB, as you and I know it. And they said, what do you want to do? And I looked at some different things, and I was like, well, I'll look for a career when I get out on mechanical. So I actually became a jet engine mechanic.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, that would be something I can do when I get out. And I enjoy working on mechanical stuff. I just don't want to work on cars and trucks. And that's just, maybe, that's the ab reaction, I think, to my grandpa's garage was, I've done enough of that. Is when you start doing oil changes at 7 years old, But so that was going into the Marine Corps. I got in the Marine Corps. I turned 18 the week before boot camp changed. I graduated rather. And within a year, I had gone through all my schooling, and I was in the desert because Desert Storm came up. I got to my duty station like August 2nd, and I deployed August 20th.
Wow.
And then I was over there for, I think, 8 or 9 months, that journey. During that time, it was eye-opening. I saw things, did things. And I was like, well, maybe this isn't for me. But also at the same time, I was putting the paperwork through for my college, to go through that program, the officers program, OCS. And I had to get the sergeant major signature. Well, the sergeant major was back in North Carolina, and I had to get the paperwork. And I just was like, that's not it. I was so living the moment over there, filling
Mhm.
the sandbags and doing what we were doing and all that stuff. It was like, okay. So that kind of changed course for me. And then at that time, I said, well, maybe this isn't what I want to do with the rest of my life. So
Mhm.
I'll get out. And then as I was getting out, I was certified in jet engine mechanics for one specific engine. I started looking at that as a career. And it really, I was disheartened because I saw like, well, I have to get my airframes and power plants license, and I
Mhm.
have to get this other license and stuff. And at that moment, this was 90 around 1984,
Mhm.
and some of the big hitters, the Boeings and stuff of that, were laying off people. And I looked and I was like, I'm very logical and maybe to my detriment at times, but I said, if I get out, this kid that I was like 21, 22, I was in 5 years, so 21, 22 at the time, whatever it was, maybe close to 23. And I've got this specific experience, and they've got someone that's been doing it for 20 years. Who's going to get hired? Who's going to be that? So I didn't see it being tangible. I didn't see it like something that I could just go after. So I held off on that, and it's just a part of my life that I love and I respect, but I didn't go further in that field. I just really looked at what it would take, and I would have to probably move out of California, and it just logically didn't make sense. So, oh, go ahead,
Yeah, I just want to interject a question
please.
here. So, a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned that you grew up in a small town and you didn't have a desire to leave that town. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times that would be interpreted as a lack of ambition or a lack of vision or something like that. And I don't get the sense that that is was the case with you. So
Right.
why did you um, decide to remain in a small town? And I think this is a by the way, I think this is a very crucial thing for people to think about right now, because this idea that we're gonna move to the big city and have this amazing life, I'm not sure that that really works anymore. And yet I think sometimes young people feel compelled to move to the big city. So I think this could potentially provide a very important insight for people.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is this actually goes a different direction because this goes into what I do now. And the first thing when I see a client one on one, I just had a new client start this week. The very last thing I say to them before we end our first session is, from now on, focus on what you do want and not on what you don't want. Because we could all write pages and pages about what we don't want in our lives, but then okay, so what do you want? Uh, that's where the catch is.
Hmm.
I've always been focused on what I do want. So when I say that I wasn't like, I have to get out of this town, it wasn't like I'm trapped. It wasn't like, oh, that's not here for me, because I did move and never went back. I did join the Marine Corps at 17. When I got out, I moved up to Northern California, close to where my dad was. My mom lived down that area still. We had moved earlier. But it wasn't so much for me like, well, this city's holding me back, or being here is keeping me from doing what I want to do. So that's why, I know people that were like, I have to get out of here. And they would go to San Francisco, and, on the weekends, which was only about an hour and a half from where I lived. And that wasn't me. So it wasn't so much about saying, well, I'm happy here because I like my town, but it was, I just knew that there was more for me out there and that I was going to find it. So it wasn't about, well, I have to leave this place to get to
Hmm.
what I want. It was, I'm going to have what I want, and whether that happens. So to clarify, I wasn't like happy and I'm just going to stay here. And because it's a farming community. So there
Hmm.
was economically, there was only so many options there and so much industry you could do. But it wasn't like, well, I hate this place and I have to get out of here. And oh my goodness, it just was, my vision was just, I saw a different path. I knew I was destined for other things. I knew I was destined for, and I'll use the word because as a young person, it's safe to use. As you get older, people kind of look at it. But I knew I was destined for greatness. I knew I was destined for something bigger than where I was already at,
Hmm.
and I was going to find it. So I didn't necessarily have to leave the location because what's the title of the book? Wherever you go, there you are.
Mhm.
So I knew I had to change myself. I knew how to change in my internal to get the external that I wanted.
Mhm. And so, how did you know that you were destined for greatness? To use your phrase,
Right.
and what is it? Because again, I think most people would say, "Oh, you think you're going to be, I don't know, president of the United States, right?" Because
Right.
that's how they define greatness.
Right.
And what does that mean? From your perspective, I was destined for greatness.
I knew there was bigger things on the horizon for me. And I couldn't put a pin in it like, oh, this is specifically what it is, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be the president of the United States, or so on and so forth. I just knew there was more for me than I could see in the town that I was in,
Hmm.
and where I currently was at in my mind. I knew that I had to expand my mind and expand my vision to be able to see what I could see. I had to turn that light on.
Hmm.
But I knew that once that light was on, the room was vast. That I knew that there was something out there for me that was bigger. And not to go too sideways with this, but my leanings are towards Buddhism, and being whole and center and complete inside, and being true to myself. That's greatness.
Hmm.
Greatness isn't an external thing where someone says, oh, well, that person has that job, he's great, because they always say that happiness is the greatest destination. If someone was to pass away and you said, oh, well, they were rich, well, someone could ask, well, were they happy? But if someone was to pass away and you go, oh yeah, he had a great life, he was really happy, you'd say, oh, that's great. So
Hmm.
it could be the destination. So I think for me, greatness was that destination. Greatness was finding, for me, what it is and what it's become is living my purpose with passion. I couldn't articulate it back then, but truly that's what it is. And for me, it's helping people. That's
Hmm.
my greatness, is being able to help people change their lives. That's that ripple. That's
Hmm.
where I become greater than myself.
So, okay, so now let's pick up your career path. You're out of the Marine Corps. You decide you're not going to continue in jet engine mechanics. So it sounds like there's another turning point there for you. So where do you go from there?
So there's the catch, and this is the greatest part about the story, I think, because I think the challenge is changing our values. And this, not to go into the military side, because this is in our veterans group, but as you know, as a veteran, when you get out of the military, you look around, you're like, well, wait a minute, because you just came from a whole and complete world. It's,
Hmm.
the military is encapsulated, and you could happily stay within that bubble and not have to go outside of it. It's self-contained. But
Yes.
then you get out in the we'll call it the real world, or the civilian world, as we would have said,
Hmm.
and you're like, wow, and it's confusing, but it's
Hmm.
great because there's opportunities.
Hmm.
Here's the challenge, though, is that back in my day in 1994 when I got out, well, what should I do when I get out? Well, there's a book at the library called "What Color's Your Parachute." Maybe you could check it out and read it. That was our transition back in the day, and for the old timers, it's even worse than that. It's like, get out of here. Here's your paperwork. Get off base. We'll escort you off base.
Right.
And so it wasn't a transition. So I got out, and then I think that's the biggest challenge in life, is that if we don't have a mentor, or we don't have a vision or a guide, it's easy to get lost in the mix.
Hmm.
So, I always tell the story. I said, well, I got out of the military, and I was like, well, okay, what do you do as an adult? Well, I guess you get a job. You have to get a job.
Right.
And I guess you get a place to live, and you get in a relationship. And my girlfriend at the time, is now my wife, came back with me. Her dad was a retired Marine, and she was actually visiting her mom in the town that I was living in, North Carolina. And we started dating about 6 months before I got out. And she said, yeah, let's do it. And she came back with me to California. But
Wow.
what do? You're young, and you just like, you figure these things out, because there's not someone that's helping you or guiding you for the most part, for my experience. But I think that's a challenge for a lot of us, is that it's just like, well, here, go be an adult.
Right.
So I said, well, what am I going to do? So I said, well, I have to get a job. I'm really fit. I just got out of the Marine Corps. I have a lot of energy. I have this leadership abilities. I was a sergeant when I got out, leader of men, leader of troops, so to speak, or Marines. And I was like, I know I could find something. So I did a couple part-time like warehouse jobs and stuff just to make money. And then I started working. I was like, well, retail looks like something I could do. I don't have a college degree, but I can use my leadership. I see there's managers that don't have degrees, and I love working with people, so I can do that. So I got into retail, and I did a good job. And someone recognized that and said, "Hey, you do a good job. Do you want to be a manager?" And I became a third key, a fourth, a floor manager, so to speak, the entry level. And I did that, and I said, "Okay." And they said, "Oh, you're doing a good job. Do you want to be an assistant manager?" Okay. Well, you're doing good at that. Do you want to move to this other city and help us run this other store? Okay. And it just went from there. So I ended up being in retail leadership for 26 years.
Oh,
Just doing what I did because I found enough. And this is part of this of my story for sure. And I see we got some time. I'm happy to get into it.
yeah.
It became how do I honor who I truly am and make a living?
Hmm.
And within, if you've ever worked in retail or been around retail, which we all have, it's chaotic. That's a lot
Hmm.
of stress, and it takes a lot to do well at it. But you can do well at it. You just have to grind out. You have to work hard. And I said,
Hmm.
I can work hard. And then I went into HR. I went into the HR team. I was a trainer for like 6 years, as well as running stores. So I was able to make myself happy enough within that job scope.
Hmm.
But all along, I just had this calling. All along, I kept getting that tap on the shoulder saying, "You are not being true to yourself. You are not doing what you were put here to do. You need to do it." And one of those strongest fingers was my wife. She's been my biggest advocate, or not. She's been the biggest one in my corner my whole career, my whole life. To where I'd come home from a really bad day, and she'd say, "How many more signs do you need from the universe to know that you're not where you're supposed to be? That you have a much bigger plan for you, that you have other things you should be doing. You have these gifts and you're not using them." And we find these excuses. Well, I won't make money at it. I shouldn't make money at it. I don't know what to do. I don't, once again, not having a mentor, not having a guide, not being able to see that picture, I was scared. And I said, well, I'm doing this retail thing. I'm making decent money. We're living, we were living in the Bay, well, Southern California, then we moved up back to the Bay Area.
Hmm.
And it was enough. It was just enough to keep me in the game. And to be very open and honest here, I just recently went back to where we used to live. I love the area, and I go to Half Moon Bay. There's a beach town that's just an amazing spot. And I was walking, and this is maybe too much, but I'm just going to share it. I was walking downtown, and I was thinking, just having a conversation with myself, as we're apt to do. And I was thinking, like, what were you doing when you were here? And my response was, "You were waiting." And I'm like, waiting for what? I was waiting for something that wasn't going to show up. It was something that I had to go get, but I wasn't at the point where I was ready to go get it. And
Hmm.
so I became stagnant and really unhappy. I was unhappy because I wasn't going after anything. I wasn't answering my call. I was just existing. I was just doing enough within my career. I had a semantics, but I had a job, not a career, in
Hmm.
my vision.
So being in and you happen to have been in retail, I think it would be reasonable to say that if you'd been in food or if you'd been in manufacturing, I'm not so sure that the industry one is in is necessarily as relevant. But within retail, which was your industry, what what was kind of the state of the other people that you worked with? And how did that impact where you found yourself, that afternoon walking, walking in the sort of the streets of, this town outside of Half Moon Bay.
Yeah, that's a great point. I usually try to work that in because it's so true, because it speaks to how I was able to exist within that world. Because in retail, you have a lot of young people.
Mm-hmm.
You have they're just starting their lives out. They're just getting out of high school. They're just starting college. I worked with a ton of college because some of my best friends were going to college and we met working together. People that are unsure of what they want to do in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
People that are just like me, they said, well, I could do this and make money and I don't have to have a degree. I could actually slip in and I could cashier and I could process freight and there's a lot of jobs that I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was working with my client base before I had a client base. Because I work with people who are unsure of what they want, not aware of where they're at, don't have a plan of how to get there, and don't realize that there's a lot of things that are holding them back from getting to there. Even with my experience, I had things that were holding me back, limited decisions, negative emotions that were holding me back. So the employees that I was working with offered me the opportunity to be who I am, in counseling, in coaching, in being a leader, in being that, I probably had more people in my office crying than I do now with clients. And I would be able to be there for them and sit there with them and have that conversation and say, hey, what's going on? Oh, I'm fine. Come on, let's talk. Let's have a chat. And so it allowed me to have enough of my toe in that stream of where I wanted to go, to keep me from going crazy, so to speak, to keep me from being like, I have to get out. It didn't get me to that point, but I did get to that point because the culture got so caustic. The culture became about, literally, your employees are taking too many steps from the box of freight to their processing table. You're losing productivity. You're not doing your job. And these people have to work harder, and you have to push them more. And we're going to get 10 more pallets of freight, and you'd have no more payroll. And those are very specifics, but I just want to mention, because those are the kind of things that I was like, I can't be a part of this anymore. This taking advantage of people and just really just grinding people hard. And these people were, that's a lot of years. And I saw the economy come and go. And I saw the economy where people just needed a job and had to work, and they were like, I'm okay with it. And I saw the economy where there was plenty of jobs out there paying what we paid, and they said, I'm out of here because I'm not getting the respect I need. I'm not getting, the return that I need, and I'm leaving. So I was able to see that, and it just all fed onto my education, seeing people, seeing what motivated them, seeing how to motivate them, seeing how I could support them. So it was a perfect play. Besides doing what I actually do and what I love and what I'm doing now, it allowed me to practice within that system.
So 26 years working in retail, and you're kind of getting enough satisfaction that you kind of bump along for a while. But it's getting ever more difficult. What was the event, or what caused you to take that step outside of this? I don't know. Was it a cocoon of retail, and go out and and establish your practice?
So it's kind of a long journey, because it was a slow process. And it was at the end, it was just that, like, okay, I just can't do this anymore. And I'm going to go to the end and then I'll come back to the beginning. So it got to a point where I was like, I can't do this at this level anymore. I was running big boxes. I was running some big stores. You would know the names of these retailers I worked for. And I knew that I needed to separate myself, but I had to wean myself off of it. So, like I said, I'm going to jump to the beginning, but I was working part-time on my business at this time, and I was seeing clients. I was seeing clients on Tuesdays. I had an office share, and I was seeing clients on Tuesdays. But I said, you know what? I don't see the opportunity to totally pull back and go 100% on my own. Financially, there was a lot of barriers for me personally. But I said I could step back And so I went from running big box stores with anywhere, from 60 to 200 employees to running boxes that had 13 employees.
Mm.
So I was tapering off, and I went to pet retail. I went to something that just was fun. It was enjoyable. It kept paying the bills. It allowed me to get my head straight. But let me jump back, because I've been processing this for a long time. And my calling has been calling me and shouting pretty loudly for a lot of years. And I shared, jokingly about my wife, but seriously, how she said, what's it going to take for you to realize you're not doing what you want to do?
Mhm.
It took about 20 years for me to finally take that step, unfortunately.
Mhm.
But I am who I am. I'm where I'm at. So
Mhm.
I honor that journey, because it got me to where I was. That's why now I want to help people not take that long. But
Mhm.
I got to the point where I said, well, I want to help people. I'm a healer. I help people. This is what I do. But I'm also pragmatic. And I said, well, I need a toolbox. I can't just say, here, come sit with Uncle Jason and I'll talk to you. I needed a toolbox. I needed some modalities. I needed some things so how are you going to help people specifically? How are you going to process that? So I looked around at a lot of different things, started reading a lot of books, started just learning about different modalities. And I came across NLP, neuro linguistic programming.
Mhm.
And it really spoke to me because, I say what I do is an art and a science. And NLP truly to me is the art and a science. There's
Mhm.
structure. It's based on other therapies, but it works with the unconscious mind. There's how you and I have rapport matters.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of nuance to it.
Right.
So I started studying that. It was an action. I took an action. I said, I'm going to start studying this.
Mhm.
That was that. And as soon as I did that, I felt better about my situation, because I was taking action.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then, so a few years down the road, I studied a while. I took an online course, got a little tiny certification. And in 2010, I got my practitioner. I had to study, like, I don't know, 600 hours or something online. And then I went for 7 days straight in Henderson, Nevada, outside of Las Vegas. And I got my practitioner certification. And at the
Mhm.
time, I said, okay, you got it. And I didn't see clients.
Mhm.
And still those blockages were in my way. And so I went a few more years, and then I got my master practitioner. I said, okay, now I'm going to do it. And I got my master practitioner. That's another like 800 hours of study plus 17 days in Henderson, Nevada, with 1 day off in the middle of training. And right after that, I got my first client. Somebody that I
Mhm.
knew said, hey, I hear you do this stuff. I'd love to work with you. He was starting off. He had one business. He was looking at opening a second business. He actually was just getting married, and he wanted some support.
Mhm.
And we worked together. He opened a second and then a third business. Had his kids. He did amazing things, and I'm just happy to have been there with him along that journey.
Mhm.
And then I started seeing clients part time. I got an office share. I started building websites, started doing stuff like that, and then financially, honestly, I think for a lot of folks, it's that financial part. It's that, oh, but what's going to happen if?
Mhm.
And we got to a spot where we moved from the Bay Area to closer to my family. We live I told you I was born in a small town. When I was born, it was 20,000 people. The town I live in now is like 7,300 people.
Wow.
It's a tiny, but it's community. It's
Mhm.
it's my heart. I love these people. I live 20 minutes. I just was in actually Davis. I live 20 minutes away from Davis, where's UC Davis. It's a huge
Oh, okay.
a huge college town. I actually grew
Right.
up there.
Sure.
I grew up
Mhm.
there for a few years. I actually lived in Davis. My brother graduated high school there. So I'm by close cities. I'm an hour out of the city, out of San Francisco. But we
Mhm.
moved here. Finances changed. We got a different house. I have a home office now, and I then went out full time in 2021 and said, I'm gonna make this happen. And I stepped out into my own career.
So I want to shift gears on you just a little bit because you've mentioned your wife several times. She's obviously an integral part of your story and your path. Um, how how did your journey, I'll call it, the increasing dissatisfaction, her cheerleading you, and yet you it sounds like not necessarily, taking action perhaps on this, in the way that she would see you doing it. How did that impact your marriage? If you're willing to discuss that, and by the way, you can just say, I'm going to decline to answer this question because I realize it's very personal. But for people who are married, I think sometimes they get tied up in that issue, and it is a daunting one. And not meaning to sound chauvinistic, but I think men in particular, we put a very high value on our marriages, in a way. I was reading some things recently that women don't, or in a different way than women do. And so I'm curious, what was that dynamic like, if you're willing to share that.
I am, and I'll actually go deeper than you're asking because
Okay.
it's pertinent to the conversation, and it's a sad story that becomes happy. So I mentioned that my wife, I met her when I was just getting out of the Marine Corps. She didn't know I was in the Marines. I was in the Air Wing. My hair was growing out. My hair was just a little bit longer, or a little bit shorter than it is now. Believe it or not, I didn't have the beard, but she didn't know I was in the Marine Corps. But we were together. She moved back with me. She had just turned 21. I was getting close. I was 22-ish, close to 23 at the time. Just young. And part of all this whole story is what? Didn't know what I wanted, didn't know what I was supposed to do. We moved back to California. We were both trying to figure out our lives. We were both trying to figure out what to do. Part of that is what? Well, you get married. So we've been together about 2 years, and I asked her to marry me. That's a funny story in and of itself. But anyway, so we got married, small ceremony with just our families. And we were together, and we were both trying to figure our lives out. And I was not happy because I was just working, but talking about values, my values growing up was you have to work hard to make a difference. You work hard, you work hard, you work hard, family is second. That's my grandfather's influence.
Okay.
And that's what I was doing. I would get up some mornings. I had to leave the house at 4:30. Sometimes I wouldn't get home until 11 o'clock at night. And that's just what I had to do. And because my values were work, value, or give value to the world, make money. And she was, she wanted to have fun and party and be a person and that. So we actually got divorced.
Oh.
We actually, and she was brave enough to say, this isn't working. We're both on our different journeys, and we're not on the same journey together. My words, but that's basically what it was. And so I was gutted. She was my actual heart. She is my heart. And so we ended up getting divorced and separating. And this was 1999, actually. And just to close that loop, 7 years later, she got remarried. A few years later, she got remarried. I lived la vida loca. I was out just living that crazy life and just trying to experience life and just running around the world, traveling a lot, doing stuff. And 7 years later, I ended up getting moved down. She moved to Southern California. I moved to Southern California with my work. We'd always been connected because we love each other. We're always in each other's life. She got divorced like a year before I moved down there. She had changed some things in her life that had affected our relationship, and we ended up getting back together. And then we've been back together ever since. And so we got married again in 2009, and we've been married for 15 years now. But
Wow.
How that pertains to the story and the question is, in 1999, when she left me, because she stepped out, and it was the right thing. We weren't happy. It caused me to step back and look and say, what's important to you? What matters in this life? You're working hard. You're your nose to the grindstone. You're doing what you think you're supposed to do, and it's not getting the results that you want. And now you're alone. What are you going to do? And that's what led me to say, well, you need to be who you are. You see that you haven't done a good job at being someone else and being who you're not. The results are, the proof's in the pudding. You need to be yourself. You need to be true to who you are. And that's what led me to, hey, I need to make this happen. So I saw the importance. You talked about values. I actually had written down values before, right before you said that. I wrote down values because what's important to us is what values are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that led me to see what's most important to me. And within the relationships are, two people trying to live as one is relationships, and
Mm-hmm.
that could be challenging. And you both have to be flexible. You both have to give, and that's that reality. So she has been so supportive of me, though. She was not like, well, you need to get a different job because you need to make more money, or you need to adjust. It was heart centered. It was coming from her heart, and I felt that. So I knew that she wasn't having these conversations based on I was doing something wrong. She wanted me to do what was right for me, and because if I'm a better Jason, I'm a better husband.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the key in relationships is you have to align your values. And they don't have to be the exact same, but they need to be close.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody has career as their number one value, what's most important to them, and the other person has family as what's most important to them, there's going to be some conflicts. There's going to
Right.
be some challenges. And so her her wanting to be aligned with myself being aligned was I didn't see it as stop bugging me. I saw it as, thank you. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you for reminding me of who I'm supposed to be. So it wasn't contentious. It was a loving coming from a loving place.
Mm-hmm. So now you're in private practice. Talk about what you do, how you work with your clients, how you help people.
So, based on everything I just said, you can see kind of what I'm going to say, where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I work for people that are in their early 30s to their mid 50s that can't even, some of them can't even imagine having a purpose or know that they have some sort of calling or purpose, but can't see how to get there and help
Mm-hmm.
them get there. The first thing we do, and I see clients one-on-one virtually, just like this. I see,
Mm-hmm.
so it's a blessing because I'm a master practitioner in neurolinguistics, hypnosis, timeline therapy. I'm certified in polyvagal theory. I've got my tool bag now,
Mm-hmm.
and I work with the unconscious mind to help clear all these things out. So I help people clear out what's stopping them from seeing their purpose and from
Mm-hmm.
living their purpose. So when
Mm-hmm.
we do that one-on-one, it's hey, let's clear everything out. Let's clear out the limiting decisions, the limiting beliefs from the past, the things that tell you, well, you can't make money unless you do this. Well, you're not going to make enough money. We clear all that out because we see our external world through filters.
Mm-hmm.
And those internal filters is what I help people discover and adjust as needed. And
So,
so, okay.
I'm sorry, just real quickly before you continue, when you use the word purpose, what is your definition of when you say, help people find their purpose? What is your definition of purpose?
That's a great question because I usually mention this. So it could be intimidating. The word
Mm-hmm.
purpose can be like, oh my goodness. But guess what? When I wake up in the morning, I have a purpose. And you know what my purpose is? Get out of bed. And you know what my next purpose is? Feed my cats. So it doesn't have to be this big, huge, scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have a focus. What's your focus? What's your, I interchange purpose, calling, and there. What makes you happy? What makes you smile? When you think about doing this, what can you feel inside? I want to do this. And it doesn't have to be owning your own business. It doesn't have to be, doing something one-on-one. You can find your purpose within a business, working for somebody else. You can find, hey, my purpose is to do my best job. My purpose is to have money for my family so I can enjoy my time away from work. That's my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be different things to different people, but for me, when I think about it, it's what drives you, what gets you up in the morning, what makes you happy.
Okay. So in my work, and if you look behind me, you can see there's this triangle. Basically, it's called the three pillars of attainment. And at the very peak, right there, is identity. And I define identity as having two parts. One is purpose and one is mission. And so purpose is, who do I want to be? So, for example, um, a loving father, a dedicated athlete, whatever those personal definitions are.
Mhm.
And mission is what I want to accomplish in whatever sphere it is that I happen to be operating in. What do I want to accomplish overall in my life? What do I want to be remembered for? What do I want to accomplish today? I'm saying, what do I want to accomplish within my family life? What do I want to accomplish within my professional life? It's et cetera, et cetera. So it seems like, in a way, you're combining both of those ideas into your idea of purpose. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's spot on.
Okay, so then you've mentioned some of the tools you use, like NLP, which is, I remember, this is going back a long time ago when he was first getting started. Nobody really knew who he was. Tony Robbins. I
Right.
think he did a talk on NLP
Mhm.
for a group I was in. There were probably 20 of us, right? And I was in the front row. He's doing his thing, and of course now he's this big,
Right.
whatever. But so I'm certainly familiar with that. So what are these tools that you've mentioned several of them, and how do you employ them to help your clients?
So every person is different, and so I have that's where we have my first meeting is called a detailed personal history, and we really get to the what's going on, where are
Mhm.
you at, where do you want to go. And using these tools, though, is so the simplest form of describing NLP is using the language of the mind to get the results we want.
Mhm.
So we interpret our external world internally, and they go, like I mentioned before, the filters. They go through these filters, our values, our beliefs, our thoughts, our memories, and then we turn that into action. We turn that into feelings, which turns it into action. If you're not living the life that you want to live,
Mhm.
in that area, there's a problem with either your filters or your strategies, how you're going about achieving what you want in those areas. And that's what I help people discover and see. So, every to the simplest form is a thing called submodalities, not to make this an NLP class, but submodalities, which modalities are sight, sound, hearing, taste, feelings. Submodalities are the nuances of that. So you see a picture, is it clear? Is it in color? Is it black and white? Is it near? Is it far? Is it moving pictures? Is it still?
Right.
We take our external world and we formulate pictures in our heads. And the
Mhm.
quality of those pictures in our heads is how we see those items. So if you have something that you really like, that picture is going to most likely be in color, clear, close up to you. If you have something that you really dislike, it's most likely going to be black and white, fuzzy, picture will be farther away from you. So it's part of how we code. And I also work with the unconscious mind. Some people call it the subconscious mind. That's where the conscious mind is what you know, your unconscious mind is who you are. And so you can't just think change and change. You have to do some external work or internal work. And that's what I help people do. So using these tools, I help people to first of all realize that. Ask yourself, I have this belief about something and it's affecting my life. So ask yourself, where does that belief come from? And most likely, you're either going to go, I have no idea where that came from. Or you might, if you're having that awareness, you might track it back. Like I talked about my grandfather. I have an awareness of, oh, well, because grandpa always said, you have to do this to get this. And that's my belief now. But
Mhm.
was that belief serving me? And it wasn't. So I had to change that belief. So that's
Mhm.
some of the nuance of what I do with people.
So, and this may seem like a silly question, and maybe it is, by the way. How does someone know that he's dissatisfied with his life, as opposed to, for example, chronically tired? You know what I'm saying? Or um, uh, going through a rough patch in a relationship or in a job or something, right? Those are, I would say, those are different than than having life dissatisfaction, right? Because even if we're satisfied with our life, we're going to go through times when life still kind of stinks, right? Because that's the nature of life. So how do we know that we're, to put it sort of bluntly, how do we know we're at the point that we need to call Jason and say, "Hey, brother, my head's screwed on backwards."
It comes down to, so I don't have the technical definition, but like say depression. Depression is actually a diagnosis, and you have to meet certain criteria for depression. And it has to be, you felt this way and this way for, I think it's 10, it used to be 10 days. Now it's, I think, 16 days or something. So there's those nuances, technical things that you would look at, like, has this been going on for a long time? Is this something that is not for me? Is this something that I'm not happy with today? Or is something off? And usually in our lives, it, and God could be a challenging word for people, but
Mhm.
God is just, there's a higher power, whatever that is to you. But Wayne Dyer used to say, do you wake up in the morning and say, "Good morning, God"? Or do you wake up and go, "Good God, morning"? You know?
Right.
And that's kind of funny, but that's the way to look at it. Are you excited to start your day? Are you engaged with your life? When you're disconnected from your life, it. You might not share it, and that this goes on. We're coming up on the hour, but that comes about mental health and the stigma around mental health, and you got to suck it up, and you got to just do it, and you got to just man up for the men, and well, don't be so emotional for the women, and and it goes for both of us. But I just use examples that we kind of see the stigma. So if you find yourself just pushing through, or you find yourself just getting through it, or making it happen, or if you here's the perfect example. If you go on vacation and you come back and you need a vacation from your vacation, once again, wherever you go, there you are. Know that something's disconnected. And there's three connections. There's connection to self, connection to others, and connection to a higher power, nature, God, source, creator, whatever you call it. If there's a disconnect in any of those three, you feel it, You have to be honest with yourself and just
Mhm.
say, that's like meditation. You sit in meditation and you just know, wow, something's off, something's going on. And you might not be able to put a label on it. It may not be, well, oh, I hate my job, or I'm not satisfied in my career, but you can feel something's not right. And why we're here for a very short amount of time
Mhm.
on this planet, in this being, in this human form. Why be anything less than enthralled? Why be anything less than excited for your next day? And I know that's a leap. I know going from day to day to there, well, we have to work hard and we've got to do that. Whistle while you work. You can enjoy what you're doing and still do it if it's something even that you don't love. So if you find there's a disconnect, if you find that just something's off, I can't even, if you can't imagine your purpose, if you can't imagine something that makes you excited about your day, that's an even greater reason to come and talk to someone such as myself.
So I've noticed on a number of times you've quoted my favorite line from Buckaroo Banzai: "No matter where you go, there you are."
Right.
And I'm just I'm we only have a couple more minutes, but I'm curious because I know what it means in the context of the movie. Um, what does that mean, in the context that you're using it?
So it's actually the way I use it. And yes, that's a great movie, and I watch it at least once a year. But I'm actually quoting a book by John Kabat-Zinn,
Oh,
a
okay.
meditation master, and that's his book. Is that wherever you go, there you are, and that's talking about meditation. Quick, I know we have like 30, 60 seconds. I'll try to tell a quick Wayne Dyer story.
If we go a minute or too long, don't worry
Okay.
about it.
And so Wayne says, he tells us he's passed away, but Wayne Dyer was an author and a speaker, and he tells a story that one time he did a talk on live TV in New York, finished, flew back home to Florida. He was living in Florida at the time. He was walking down the beach, and a woman came up to him. She's like, "Oh my God, you're Wayne Dyer. I love your books. I love you. I saw you on TV last night. That's so great. Hey, I just want to say that I didn't know you lived here in Florida. My family, we're thinking about moving down here. how are the people here? And he says, oh, well, where are you from? And she said, I'm from Chicago. He goes, oh, well, how do you find the people in Chicago? She goes, oh, they're amazing. They're very friendly. They're very outgoing. They're great. And he goes, oh, you'll find the people here like that then. You'll find the people here just like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, have a great day. Goes on down the beach. Another 10 minutes. Someone walks up to him and says, oh, Wayne Dyer, I saw you on the show last night. Hey, my family and I, we live in Wisconsin. We're thinking about moving here. And he goes, oh, great. Well, she's like, how are the people here? And he said, well, how are the people in Wisconsin? Oh, they're kind of offish and they stick to themselves and they're kind of cliquish and whatever. And he goes, oh, well, you'll find the people here just the same. So you bring that to your world. The saying is perception is projection. How you see your world is how you are inside. So that's what that means. So when you're happy inside and you're at peace inside, your world is peaceful.
Yeah. And I just share an experience I had last week. I was at an event for a friend of mine, and afterwards I ended up talking with the hostess and a couple of her friends for quite a long time. And we were talking about various places we'd been, Paris. I'd never been to London, but they'd been to London, New York, and I was observing to them that when I was in Paris, I found the people there to be very, very friendly. I said, I at the time I didn't know a whole lot of French, but
Right.
I used what French I had, and they would politely, correct me when I made a mistake, which I appreciated because
Right.
it helps me speak right. And as I thought about it, because I said essentially the same thing about being in New York and being right. It's like, and until you use that example, I didn't realize I look at pretty much every place, people are friendly. And maybe it's because I do my best, to be friendly to people.
Right.
Right. And say hello as I'm, walking by someone or whatever, just, greet them with a pleasant countenance. That's sort of that's a Jewish philosophy. You should greet every person with a pleasant countenance, smile at them or whatever. So, so that's such a great, I didn't think of that, um, that aspect of no matter where you go, there you are. But now that you've connected the two, that'll be a great thing to sort of hang in the back of my mind as as I go through life. Well, Jason, we are out of time. I think we could, easily, as I find so often with my guests, we could spend easily another hour.
Yeah.
Definitely have to have you come back and delve more into what you're doing. But what I like so much is that you built a life and a successful life on your own terms.
Right.
And I think so many people define success as being, I don't know, like I use Elon Musk just because I think he must be the most well-known guy in the world, right? He's fabulously wealthy and all this kind of, and it's like, hopefully for Elon Musk, he looks at himself and he says, I'm successful.
Right.
Most of us are not going to be Elon Musk for a lot of reasons, and that doesn't matter. What we need to be is, Jason Jurado, Kevin Bemmel, right? We need to be who we are, and I think the summation of what you've said the last hour is that is what you've done in your life, and that's what you help people do in their lives. And I in this time when I think people are so dissatisfied with their lives and their relationships and all these kind of things, it seems to me a lot of that dissatisfaction starts in here.
Yeah.
And then it gets projected out. Oh, I'm dissatisfied. It must be my spouse, my children, my coworkers, my whatever. So thank you so much for bringing that message to the viewers today. I really appreciate that. Just before I wrap up the show, any kind of final thought?
Find what makes you happy. Find what makes you happy and find a way to get there. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's overnight, but truly pick some area in your life and say, I want that area to be better. And just sit with yourself and say, how can I make that better? And just take that first step. That's how we do it. We take that first step.
Great. So after the show posts, I'll put your contact information in the show notes. So
Okay.
if a viewer would like to get in touch with you, they'll be able to. I'll put your website, email address, and whatever else you want in there, so that people can get in touch with you if they'd like to work with you. So I'm going to have you hang tight here while I wrap up the show, and then we can talk offline for a minute.
All right.
So folks, thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate you joining us. Um, I promised you a heck of a show with Jason, and you can see that in his quiet, very centered way, Jason really delivered. So I can't encourage you enough. If to this is I do this, I say this once in a while. This is an episode I would encourage you to watch again and listen and really absorb Jason's story, and really the wisdom that he offers. I know I found myself several times going, gosh, he's articulating something that I've felt and hear that maybe I couldn't quite formulate into words. And it's a very powerful skill to be able to help people do that, because being able to put some intentionality behind what's inside of us can help us overcome those hurdles that Jason was talking about. So coming up tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific time is my show Jiggers' Place. Right, this is our chance every other week to have a cocktail, sit back, relax, talk about all those things that are not related to our businesses and professions. My topic for tomorrow afternoon is the Maltese Falcon. Which is the better version, the book or the movie? Right, and I'm not going to tell you where I come down, but I can tell you that I like Buckaroo Banzai, which I also watch about once a year. I probably watch the Maltese Falcon at least once or twice a year, and read the book at least once or twice a year. So, tune in to find out what's this all about. But beyond that, there's a deeper issue here, right? Which resonates with us? A book maybe that's up here, a movie that's more out here. So join me for a cocktail tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific time at Jiggers' Place. And then next week at 10 a.m. Monday is my show Trusts and Estates Weekly. And then on Tuesday at 10 a.m. is Business Lessons from the Military. And then a week from today, we'll be back for the next edition of People Making Money. So one more thing before I let you go. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, please do consider subscribing. That way you'll get notified every time a new episode goes live and posts on my YouTube channel. Would really appreciate it. And having you as a regular viewer of the show, and maybe even a fan. Of course, I always appreciate comments, criticisms, and all of that. Feel free to post those in various social media. All of those links will be in the show notes as well. So before signing off, again, Jason, thank you so much for joining me today. Great conversation. And, again, we're going to have to schedule you to come back, and we'll have another conversation. And so then thank you again for joining us. And just signing off as I always do, Marie, darling, you are my bell.